Hey there.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the second Misty Uplink. So, as part of the learning that we all go through, I need to be added to the event here before we actually talk about anything substantial. How's everybody doing? Voice your doingness in chat.
Yeah, they're
as I accept and join the actual event here.
Scott and Jasmine and Lacey say good. May want to mute your volume there.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I'm here in Boulder this week, not in Washington or other parts like I normally am, so that's good. And there's Chris's face. We're going to be walking through building some skills. What else are we going to do?
We're going to talk about the recent update that happened. Was that yesterday?
Yeah.
So anybody with Misty 2 can expect to see something fresh for the robot. There's a lot of exciting stuff in that one. We're also going to be answering any questions that you have. So on the bottom of your screen, you see the Ask a Question area. It looks like Jasmine has already taken full advantage of that. Thanks for doing that, Jasmine. Seeding the amount of questions here is awesome. And then, yeah, just kind of soliciting you guys to join us in the community and kind of continue the conversation. So we're just going to jump right into it. For those of you with Misty 2, we pushed a pretty substantial update on the 8th. Now I'm going to pull up the release notes. I'm going to share my screen here so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. If I can remember how to do that. Share screen, entire screen. Cool. There we go. So I wanted to call out the community is where we post all of our release notes at all times. And Jonathan and Wu do a fantastic job of compiling all this stuff. So it's the best place to go and look. So if you look at my screen here, you're going to see 2019 October 8th release notes. So the biggest part of this particular one is there's a few potentially breaking changes for anybody that has a robot today. And the one that most people are going to interact with is the move head and move arm. Now, we recently moved away from a relative positioning system where I think it was 0 was down and 10 was up, and migrated towards you can select either degrees or radians for what position you wanted to move Misty's neck and arms. So if you have any existing skills that make use of movements, just make sure to check the current documentation and make sure that your API calls or JavaScript code is following in line with that. The other thing, we removed the ability to, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why we did that. But some of the forget face and forget faces have changed their endpoints. So again, if you're using that to clear out the cache, there's a different endpoint to do that. We also improved a lot of the follow path functionality. And if you joined us for last week's or 2 weeks ago's uplink, you'll know that we had created an entirely new navigation module within the command center. And I'll show you that again to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But there's a big improvement on the follow path commands, as well as bubbling through the actual pose in the self state. So this is where a lot of people will go and look at the WebSocket level to see where the robot is against a known map. So pretty exciting stuff there.
A lot of bug fixes.
A lot of bugs. So we actually just finished our bug bash, where a lot of our engineering team was focused just purely on squashing as many bugs as possible. God, that's kind of a graphic image. I don't know why. Anyways, that's all to say that Misty now works better. But so be sure to check out the release notes. We spend, and I mean Jonathan spends a good amount of time making sure that those are up to date, accurate, has like a lot of detailed information. And so if you're new to our community forums, you can go to announcements, and there's actually a release category. If you sort here by announcements and then go to releases, and you'll see all 23 of our releases to date with a good amount of information.
Yeah, after we do a release, we tend to pin it to the top, so you'll come in and you'll see the most recent one, but you can always go back and see see older ones.
Cool. So if there's any questions about releases, anything that you're wondering about where things are on the pipeline, again, the community forums are the best place for it. If it's something specific to a release, you should go ahead and respond to that release post, and then we'll be sure to make sure it's in reference to that one. Otherwise, if it's more specific questions, we do have the developer support channel as well as the general discussion and everything else.
Yeah.
So check it out. And I realized that I didn't introduce myself or my colleague Ben here. I don't know if you remember from last time where Ben was remote, and now we get to enjoy his presence.
Oh yeah.
Here at the Boulder office.
We're going to be getting out more and more around the country this last 3 months of the year. They're probably going to launch something in the community site to basically be like request Misty in your hometown. So if you're really jonesing for a bunch of black-clad geeks to join you in your town with some robots, you can kind of vote in the community on that. So We'll be out. Chris will be out. We'll be in Austin next, but we've got a few events in the Bay Area, and we're going to try to find some more less often served markets too. So,
So we had a request for Australia, which I personally volunteered for, but we'll see how our international travel is looking towards the end of the year. But if you have more than one other person, it's a good chance for us to kind of prioritize our roadshow as we start to figure out our last quarter of 2019 planning.
Mm-hmm.
So the next part of what we wanted to go through today is a code walkthrough. So what we had chosen today to walk through is using Misty's camera in conjunction with a send external request call to add photos to an Imgur album. So this does two things really interesting. One, it's using your robot to connect to an external service, which is always interesting to see. And then two, a lot of the times different cloud services will require a URL for images and assets and stuff like that. So this makes it really easy for you if you wanted to use something like AWS's computer vision system or Microsoft's cognitive services or any number of alternative services to do some interesting processing from images coming off of a robot. This makes it a lot easier to get and start to experiment with those. So we're just going to jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. This is the point where somebody should tell a joke.
Misty should tell a joke.
Ah, that would be a great skill. Mm-hmm. You see my screen? Cool. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight here. Oh man, everybody. Our prototype engineer, CP, has a repository called Misty Skills. Now these are always going to be in flux and a lot of this other stuff, but there's one in particular called Example Skills. Now we're going to be slowly pulling this into the official Misty repository as we have a chance to test them out and kind of do a little bit more with it. But for today, I wanted to call this out because it's a really interesting place for people to go if you wanted to do things that are a little bit more on the bleeding edge, as it were. So the one that we're going to go through today is this one called Imgur Image Upload. And for anybody that's new, every skill has two files. It has the JavaScript file and it has the JSON file. Now the JSON file is what tells the robot, one, the name of the skill and the assets that it utilizes, which is still a little bit in flux. So I wouldn't make a huge use of it today. But it also gives you the ability to have it trigger on startup. So if you wanted to have something that makes Misty come alive or do a specific activity, you can trigger it and start up through the JSON file. For today's purpose, I just wanted to have everybody look at this Imgur image upload.js file. It's extremely simple. However, I just wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page on a few of the prerequisites that you need to have in place before you get running with it.
Check Command Plussing that a little.
Oh, that's
better.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Is Woo on this?
Yeah, Woo's here.
Yeah, Woo. If there's anything from your perspective that I'm not calling out or if it's not visible, be sure to just unmute and yell at us because it's hard sometimes when you're going through this. So Imgur, for those of you that aren't familiar, I'm going to pull up Imgur here so you guys can kind of look at what I'm talking about. Imgur is basically just an image repository for people to throw things on and share GIFs and images and memes and all this fun stuff. What you have to do to really interact with the skill is, one, create a new account on Imgur, and then two, you have to create their API calls. So if you look at the code itself, I'm going to switch over to Visual Studio Code because it makes this a lot easier. It makes this a lot easier to view. So as you're going through the JavaScript code itself, one, like I said, you need to make sure that you have an Imgur account, and two, you have to create a new application using Imgur services. And I cannot remember off the top of my head where exactly you do that. I believe it's in API dev.imgur. API.imgur.com. Here you go. Oops. I believe it's settings here. Okay. So in your account, you click on the little drop down, you have a settings page, and then you go over to the security area here. Oh, sorry, applications. You'll notice that I have a new client called Code Walkthrough. So what you're going to want to do is generate a new app, get your client ID and your secret key. And then in the documentation itself, they have the authorization workflow. Now, I'm not going to walk through this just because it's a little time consuming to discuss how to use Postman and everything else. If anybody has a problem getting this started, don't hesitate to reach out to community forums, and we'll do a post on like how to go through all this stuff.
This fits in nicely with the mission for this next period of time, where we are asking people to connect Misty to third-party APIs. So this one could count. I don't want to see 100 Imgur calls, but yeah, that'd be Imgur skills, I guess. Yeah,
I guess. But the core component that I'm trying to get at is, in the code, you see this upload image function. Now, this is what's actually requiring your assets to your Imgur account and the token that allows you to take an image from your robot and then send it to Imgur, an Imgur album. So there's two pieces of things that you need. You need an album ID, which I'll show you where to get it, and you also need your authentication token. So right after this, I'm going to delete these tokens, so don't try to use my account and all that fun stuff. But after you get your authentication token that allows you to use the Imgur APIs, you're going to want to go in to Imgur itself and create an album. Now, anytime that you create an album, you just create a new post. I'm going to drag and drop a new image here. I've got this picture of Ian that the robot took. I'm going to drag it here. I'm going to call this walkthrough up here. And there we go. And you'll see up at the top, you have this URL here. It's imgur.com. Can everybody see that?
You have to hit add image.
It already uploaded.
Oh, yeah, okay,
That's
cool.
to add another image, which we'll talk about here in a second. So up at the top, you see imgur.com/a/some crazy thing. So I'm going to post this into chat, so that way everybody can know what I'm talking about here. Oh, fun. You can see all that stuff. So here's the album that we're going to be working in today. So this is all the setup you have. You have the create an album, and you have get an authentication token from Imgur by setting up your own application. In the code, in the JSON body here in the upload image, you want to put the album ID that we just looked at, and then you're going to put your token over here in bearer, and then your token there.
Do you want to put the album ID we just did?
Yeah, it's right here. Oh, yeah, let's see that. Thank you. Oops. Is that the right one? Let me check.
That's the one you just made.
Yep, that's the one I just made. Cool. Now, we're ready to run this skill for the first time here. I wanted to call out, for those of you that are using Visual Studio Code, we do have a Misty extension, which has officially been released in the Microsoft Store. So if you just type in Misty, in this little icon is the extensions area. If you're on OS X, you can use the command Shift Command X to bring it up. I don't know what it is on Windows, but keyboard shortcuts are fun. Just type in Misty and you'll see that mine's already installed. I wanted to just take a minute and talk about the extension because it does make development a lot easier, and I'll show you why. We've made our changes to the code. I've added my token. I'm gonna use what's called the command palette and do Command Shift P, and then you'll see if I start typing Misty, it'll show me all the things that I can do within the extension. And so this makes it super straightforward to just upload and run. I have the IP address of my robot. I'm going to hit enter. And then down in the bottom, you'll see that it's uploading to my IP address. Your skill has been uploaded. Your skill has started. So now if we go look at our command center and we do skill runner, you'll see that my Imgur image upload is there. I'm going to look at the console so that way I can see the messages that come through. So I'm going to upload and run so that way you can see this here. Upload and run. There you go. So you'll see the debug messages coming through. Uploading image to Imgur. You'll see that that was a debug comment.
Probably put the console on the side to side because it's a little obscured here. With
it's pretty small. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ben. Let me push that over there. That makes it a little easier to see. So for those of you who are still fresh to Misty skills, we make liberal use of debug statements for a lot of our sample code just to make sure that we're sane. In this case, I like to have the name of every function that I enter just to make sure that there's not any silent failures or syntax errors, or I can at least figure out where things are going wrong, which happens to me quite frequently. And those come up in the debug messages that you see in the JavaScript console. The second one.
Jasmine had a question, and she asked, can you only use the extension by using that shortcut, or are there upload and run buttons too?
That's a really good question.
I don't know if there are buttons that get added in.
Yeah, I think if you do go, you don't need the, let me see. Oh yeah, so if you do view and then go command palette, this will bring up that bar. So you don't have to use a keyboard shortcut to get to this. But the command palette is basically the same thing in Sublime Text, and I think Atom has a similar concept. But it's just a way to bring up a lot of the shortcuts and make it searchable. So if you wanted to go without the keyboard shortcut, all you have to do is just go view command palette, and that brings it up.
Well, I know Jasmine knows how to upload skills using Skill Runner too. Yep. So I mean that way that's still available to people, but this is a way if you're already in the code. So
yeah. So just to re-articulate that, if you go in, actually let me open it up here. Reveal in Finder. If you look at your Skill Runner, the other way to upload is just drag and drop over here, and then you'll see the same messages. Skill successfully updated. I can click Start in Skill Runner. I still get the same messages. And now those are the two ways to upload and run a skill with Misty. So let's take a look at our album. Now, Imgur doesn't automatically refresh albums, but if I refresh, now you can see
every time you start that.
Let's do this. Yeah,
this will probably be better. Well, depends.
Yeah.
Our wives might think so. Maybe not.
All right. So Ben and I are going to smile. Cool. You'll see that it's upload completed or canceled. Now, because this is really just a single run, as an example, we didn't want to mess with timers or bump or registering other events or anything else. We wanted to build this in such a way to where you can just take this code and then enhance it with things like, hey, every time I hit the left bump sensor, upload to one album versus the right bump sensor, maybe another one.
Whenever I recognize a face.
Yeah, exactly. So you can tie this code in that uploads to an Imgur album with any other skill that you might write. But let's take a look at our album. There we go. See, Ben is front and center.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. But that, in essence, is the fastest way that you can interact with a third-party service. A a few other things to look at in the code. So in essence, all this is doing is telling Misty to take a picture. I'm going to call it test image. I'm going to set some resolution characteristics. Our program, our runtime environment will default to anything with an underscore is the default callback. So in this case, we didn't explicitly define a callback by name, but you can always get the callback information by doing underscore and the name of the event, or the name of the, I don't know what to call that, the method, I guess. So in this case, if you don't articulate a callback method, if you just do underscore the name of the method itself, you'll get the data coming back from that. So that's what's going on here. So underscore take picture is the callback that the take picture command responds with. I do a base 64 conversion. I call my upload image function. I create the relevant JSON information that Imgur requires, and you can see in the comment here that here's the actual endpoint that we're using. I use Misty send external request, and in this case, if you at the end here you see this image upload response. Now this is actually defining a callback that we want the data to come back to. Now I'm pretty sure that if you just did underscore send external request, it would return the same way, but it's just a few different ways that you can write your skill code. So because we identified the image upload response callback, we have the response data. Now I'm writing a JSON stringify into the console, which I'll show you here in Skill Runner. That's this status 3 result. So this is basically the response from Imgur saying, hey, it was uploaded and we're good. Let's go back to the code. And then for an additional component, I'm extracting the image URL of what we just uploaded. So that comes right after this. So if we ever want to look at the last picture that we uploaded, there you go. Cool. And that's Imgur. Fun, right? Let me pull up the actual. So I called this walkthrough. There you go.
Yeah.
What do you think, Ben?
That's a pretty easy one. Is that you think the easiest API to connect with, or are there even easier ones?
Man, off the top of my head, this one's pretty straightforward as far as getting used to the OAuth authentication workflow, interacting with another REST-based endpoint, and then using send external requests. I don't think I can think of maybe weather APIs might be an easier one because it's just a get, and a lot of the times they don't have a layer of authentication. If you look at one of Ian's posts recently, that's exactly what he did, is that he used, I think it's Open Weather Maps to get data and then just have Misty react if it's warm or cold or whatever it might be. I'm gonna stop sharing here and go back to you guys. Stop sharing. So I'm open for questions at this point.
There's a lot of questions. Wu's been answering them like crazy with
nice. Thanks, Wu. Appreciate doing
fingers. We can also answer them here too, but yeah, he's been doing a great job. Some of them are probably answers that we could all give. Bringing this right here, front and center. Yeah, that's nice.
This is the whole reason we're here.
I guess was there anything else on the agenda before we jump into that?
Let me look. We kind of covered some of that stuff. Oh, I wanted to show the some of the stuff in the SDK. Let me reshare this because I know that we have a good. How many people we have in here now?
More than a dozen.
More than a dozen. Okay, so for the new folks, it's kind of fun to redo this. Oh my gosh, so many tabs. Sorry everybody. I'm gonna reshare my screen. Ben, you wanna? Oh yeah, the saw is going. Okay. So we showed this a little bit, but sdk.mistyrobotics.com is the most useful thing that I think that we can provide you guys. We did a bunch of updates to the command center. So now when you connect to your robot, you'll see that the battery level is all working, part of the bug bash. The the version numbers and everything else, system updates, all that fun stuff.
We compress the interface a little bit so that it's not quite so greedy with the amount of space it wants.
Yeah, and then we added some.
Yeah, start recording.
Start recording audio.
Yeah, no, right here. Start recording voice right here.
Okay.
Because then you get a cool visualization.
Yeah.
Is that fancy or what?
So you can
kind of see if you. It's supposed to be a representation of the spatial sound that Misty hears. So what direction? Say something.
So I'm over here.
And I'm over here.
So if you notice, you can't really see this because I'm sharing my screen,
Yeah.
but Ben and I are kind of cockeyed a little bit. So if I turn Misty around, you'll see that as I continue to talk, the direction that Misty is picking up sound changes. So this is available through a WebSocket connection to where you can get in real time the relative degree position of what Misty considers a speaker versus noise. So it's kind of fun to start to understand the way that some of these sensors work.
Yeah.
So that's super cool. I thought you were talking about the record audio. It's like, wait, that doesn't have a visualization. So there we go. And then the other area that's a little new, is our sensor data. So you can see as I click here, you can see in real time the results of the time of flights. For anybody following along, last week we had a minor bug that the status codes coming off the time of flights was being registered in the data. So you would get these random spikes of like 8 meters, and that wasn't actually true. So that's been resolved. And then I'm going to unsubscribe there, and we're going to talk about the navigation module. So check this out. So this is the area, just because the navigation controls, there's a lot of information that we kind of packed in here. So we wanted to break it out because this is something that makes Misty really, really fascinating. I don't think that this is a good.
It's not a great location for this because it's a lot of
so what I'm going to
non-walls, but let's just try it. Let's just see what it shows.
Quick start mapping. You'll see that it will wait for pose. And then you'll see up here, SLAM is exploring, has pose, and is streaming. This is a good thing. So now as we slowly rotate Misty, you'll see the yaw shift. So as Ben kind of rotates it. And it's best to do this pretty slowly because it is taking in a lot of data.
And I think that the map is set to refresh every like 30 seconds or something. So it's not like a real time yet. But we would like to get it to be real time.
So these are the things that we're working on. But we wanted to keep you guys apprised of our progress.
There's a little map.
And so as you see, here's Misty. Here's areas that it thinks are unoccupied and open. And then in this case, there's a little bit of purple, which means it's covered. So you'll see that a lot if it goes under tables or chairs or whatever, that it knows that it can drive underneath it, but it knows that there's something relatively close above it. And then occupied, obviously an obstacle, and gray is unknown areas. So I think what we're going to see is the table be very well defined.
I don't know about very, but
well, we've defined.
Yeah, you can kind of see like basically it's just our view is like the table's very bright and everything outside of it's very dark. So that's kind of what Misty's seeing too, and that's why you can see the dark edges of the table. But in this little example where I'm not doing it very gradually or programmatically at all, yeah, that's Misty mapping.
But the yaw is updating. You can do all this stuff programmatically if you want to do like the spin 360. One thing that I don't think we called out is this set head will set Misty's neck movements to be in the place that we've kind of determined is the best for mapping. So if you're trying to do this, it's a good thing to do. What we notice a lot of the time that people will do is in the SDK, they won't set a neck position, which means that it won't maintain position. So in this case, because I did set head, you'll notice that I'm trying to move it around and it maintains the position. If I stop all motors, now what I can do is move
She's all wobbly,
all
yeah.
around, yeah. So if you can see like kind of down at the bottom. Stop all motors means that it will not engage any of the motors at all. But yeah, so check it out, play with it. We were talking about the follow path stuff being better. It's not great, but we want more information from you guys, the developers.
We are still considering mapping to be an alpha feature, and we are working on it throughout the rest of the year to try to get it out of that state. But we are interested to see what people do with it, even in its current form. Look for an upcoming mission around mapping. Not the next one, but one of them coming up. Hopefully we'll get a few more releases in before we turn you loose on mapping.
Yeah. So that was what I really had for an agenda. Now we're going to open it up to questions and kind of run through. This is a good time for, should we just go through the questions? We try to read, I wasn't really reading the chat.
The chat's been, pretty well, documented. Wu's in there answering things, but he's also been in answering the other questions. But he's left a few gems for us. And
Okay.
I think that they're good. The top rated one right now is, what kind of access is there for developers to Misty's personality engine? And Alan here actually has had a lot of insight into the way that Misty's been developed over time. He's local to Boulder. He knows some of the early people who worked on this aspect of Misty. And what I will tell you is, Misty's personality engine is more of an affect engine at this point. I think that the way that people are going to be creating personality with Misty right now is through voice and emoting through the way that she moves and what she displays on her face. And the engine per se, the part where she's learning or maybe choosing which skills to run in various times, that's all future. And I think, Alan, you could be definitely someone who could help to define some of that through helping with the wish list and getting things on the roadmap. But we're totally interested in how developers specifically want to see a personality come alive. Because there's a few people on this call. I think Michael, he's got a lot of experience with Jibo. This isn't a what was Jibo called? A social robot?
Yeah.
Misty isn't a social robot yet. She may someday be a social robot, but we wanted to bring her out to developers first. So.
And I just wanted to add one caveat to that. So when we say in the future, a lot of that means to us that we're going to be the ones writing the system and doing a lot of the stuff behind the scenes and making it available to developers to utilize. Now, for you today, we do have a lot of techniques that can get you along that path. The difference is that there are some things that you would have to write yourself. So for instance, if you wanted to have your own effective states, we have misty.get and misty.set methods that allows you to store global variables that are useful between skills, such that you could do, what we would write on the back end side. That is how do I react? How do I save state? How do I react to different things, different stimuli? And then you can write all that logic in a skill and then use some of these types of things like get and set to make it consistent across an environment. So it's possible, and we can guide you in the right direction to do the things that you want to do, but we're not taking it upon ourselves to dictate, here's how you interact with Misty's personality.
Yeah, I think that there will be people in the community that actually beat us to having some real personality-like qualities with Misty, with some machine learning algorithms, with some other things that they're doing with object recognition. I think Misty will behave more, have more personality behaviors in the community than she will initially from us.
And then the last thing I'll say about that is you can utilize any sort of cloud-based service that might do this for you. Like we just showed the send external request, that you can write the logic in anything, anywhere, and then be able to interact with it using that send external request method that we just showed.
Yeah.
So you have
it's
to
a good question. And I didn't answer it in the writing, but I will mark it as something, and then maybe someone can still answer something.
Yeah, that's okay.
Start answering, done answering. I guess I should have been doing that the whole time. I don't know.
Yeah. When you start answering, it actually marks in Crowdcast, when we start answering. So if you're curious about a question, when we do that, then you can go
I'll do that with this one then,
cool.
Which Jasmine is talking about. What has been our favorite part of building Misty? And I'm going to defer to Chris because he's actually been here since it was before, right as Misty was coming out of Sphero. So
yeah, I mean, I think everybody in the company will have a different answer for that question. For me personally, it's it's being able to interact and play with robots like every single day, which is pretty cool. I think Wu and I have talked about it's a lot more fun to be able to say that I work on robots than it is to say I worked at PayPal. And you'll have to ask Wu to tell that story. But my absolute favorite part is understanding the way that robots perceive the world. So before, my experience has primarily been around IoT and individual sensors. And you get an idea about what that looks like, but it's really interesting to see how all those different things come together and then add like non-linear complexity to the actual unit itself, but also non-linear abilities, things that you can do. So it's just a really exciting to be at this point, and the amount of stuff that we've figured out over time to be able to quickly iterate on things that you're like, I wonder what it would be like to have a theme music robot that uses facial recognition to play my Spotify playlist, or how could I use it to do, can I get more information off this robot to train a machine learning model, or whatever the case is. It's really, really interesting to have a physical device in my environment that I can start to play with all these things that I've been doing through software. So that's been my favorite part.
Yeah. I haven't been involved in so much in the building, but my favorite part is getting out there and introducing Misty to people, because I get to see what their eyes light up with, like what's the thing that they want to do with the robot. And maybe even people who've never thought that they wanted to do anything with a robot before, but when they see Misty and see the capabilities, it starts to get their creative juices flowing. So I really like that aspect of it.
Vision stuff is pretty cool too. I mean, coming from the only type of vision thing that we were able to play with was like an open MV cam, which is really cool, but there's all these little limitations to it. But now that we start to see the potential with depth and mapping, it's just, man, that's cool to understand at a very low level, like how it actually works.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another one from Jasmine is about the women on the Misty development team. Wu did link to the thing that I was going to link to, but aside from, I think she's talking specifically about on the engineering team, because we do have 2 women on our leadership team. We've got one half of the product team, or the product management team is women, and we have probably four engineers out of 11, or software engineers, because we have 11 software engineers and 4 of them are women. Yeah. Then we have a woman in mechatronics, or
Kelly, she's awesome,
doing hardware. And yeah, I mean, I think the company has made a lot of concerted effort to make sure that we're getting a diversity of opinion, because we think that is makes for a better product and a better company.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've voiced in the past is because this is kind of a new device for a lot of people, making sure that at the very beginning we could introduce it to as many people as possible, we start to enable the discovery of those interesting use cases, because we're not blocked into a very narrow demographic or very narrow thought process. And that idea has translated, like Ben said, all the way back to like how we conduct our own hiring and search for talented people.
Yeah. And I did not start and stop answering that at the right time, so that'll just be something soon. Let's go to Mark's question here. What are the long-term plans for security related to a recent thread in the forums? He would like to help out, potentially. So there has actually been some great back and forth in that thread. If you're interested in it, it's Misty 2 security, or
Wu, you want to post that link?
Can't remember what it's called, but there was just some concerns brought up about Misty's apparent lack of security, and we admittedly said, we didn't put a lot of security into this robot. As a developer robot, we thought a lot of that would get in the way, and if we were selling a consumer robot, it'd be a different story. But I don't know Mark probably could enumerate the various points in that more than us, but we've been in there reading it and enjoying it. But yeah, check out the thread. I think that it sort of talks about some of the actual technical difficulties of locking more of this aspect down. We have essentially two like servers, subsystems inside that would both need to be locked down in a way. There'd be some additional overhead that we didn't think would be worth it at this stage.
And really, it boils down to our goal is to get as many people familiar with how they could use a robot in their offices, in their in commercial spaces or in their homes or whatever the case might be. And the biggest hurdle that a lot of people face with you start from a lockdown perspective is discovery becomes more about like dealing with which configuration protocols you need to do. I don't think anybody's really started learning something like AWS by messing with IAM credentials and all the stuff that they built into it.
And so this question is actually more future looking. And so I would say that we're very open to what the future looks like from a security standpoint. I think like that we're going to have customers that sort of push us in certain directions. I think we'll have big enterprise customers who will say, all right, this is great. I will buy 500 of these robots, but this and this and this need to be taken care of from a security perspective. And we'll put those things in. I think Misty 3 will look a lot different from a security perspective or what have you. I think that we just don't know yet. We haven't spent a lot of cycles defining security for Misty. We spent a lot of time thinking about it, but not defining a spec or anything.
Yeah. Cool. All right. What's next?
Misty 3. It's not a real thing yet. It's just like an idea. So if we get permission from the market to make Misty 3, we will definitely make it. Oh, dang. Ben Edwards confirmed Misty 3 is happening. Michael has a question here. Once a developer creates a skill for Misty, what's the preferred way to put it out there for other developers? Is it GitHub? Is it the forums? Any other skill repositories? I would say yes. I would say the only thing that we really encourage is sharing on the forums. Mm-hmm. I don't care what repo you use, or if you just like copy and paste your skill code in there, although that's probably not as good. But you might even see if you post a skill shared in the forums, I might come through and like help it along a little, because I'll tend to do some little formatting so that it's like more in the conventions that we're using. But we're essentially looking at share the skill to the repo, the link to the repo, share the code so people can read through it right there. And a synopsis of how it works is nice.
Yeah. So, and I'm going to be working to kind of make this a little bit more streamlined here in the future. But as of now, unofficially, our preference is throw it in the GitHub repository, make sure to have a README file, post in the forums with any additional information that somebody might need to get up and running. If there's any library requirements or something like that. Or if you're doing something like and what we called external skills, it's like running on your local machine and interacting with Misty, any sort of environmental things that you need to do, that type of thing. That makes it just anything that you do to get up and running with a skill, make sure to put it in when you're sharing your own.
Yeah. I mean, and the reason why the community site is like kind of the hub for that is because it's kind of everyone knows about that, regardless of if they use GitHub or if they use Bitbucket or whatever the new jazz is.
Yeah. Or if you're old school SVN.
All right. One more, and then we'll get back to, I think, another one from Jasmine, although Justin's doing a great job here. Can we get an update on how many robots have shipped to backers? Sure. We have concentrated so far on domestic robots. That's basically US and Canada, and the white variant of that, which I wish now, if I would have known that there was a difference in delivery between white and black, I would have ordered white.
Yeah.
But there is not. So I am waiting a black one, but we're probably 60% through white shipments, and we hope to get through the rest of those by the end of the month. I think, depending on who you talk to, there's a decent chance that like right around that time we also close out on the black robot shipments. Maybe that bleeds into the first week in November, but that's like the latest information that I have from the ops team. It's not the most conservative time frame of those. I think that they might like to say, well, everyone will be shipped to by the end of November, but I think most people will get their robots by the end of October. And then as far as international orders go, those will kick off once we get through the US and Canadian ones. So that might be another month before those are fulfilled internationally.
Yeah, we agree with you, Jasmine. I would love to have a black one for
Halloween. Yeah, that would be cool. All right, there's one duplicate, and then we've got a pretty technical one from Michael. Let's do that one first. What would you recommend is the upper limit to disk space a skill should use during runtime? And I don't know that we have an answer on that.
I mean, there's not. I think we have 16 gigs of memory available for the system, and that kind of the usage will vary based on how many images you're storing on the robot and that type of thing, how much video, that type of stuff too. It's yeah, we don't have an upper limit. Just don't less than 16, more than.
We'd like to see if you hit limits, and like what kind of skill that would be, because I'd be very interested in some of that. But I don't know that we've done extensive testing there. That'd be something to talk about.
It'd be interesting if you can write more than 8 gigs in a text file skill. I'd be impressed.
Cool. All right, last one that we have here, but keep them coming. We'll have a few more minutes. We can always go a little over.
Yeah.
How do you see Misty being used as a tool for education? We've already been seeing this. In fact, last Saturday, a bunch of us were out at the St. Vrain Innovation Center for their schools. And for one, that's an amazing center, great building, has a lot of things there. But what was so cool was all the middle school kids that had come out to work on robots. And this wasn't middle school kids who were just content with like pushing some blocks around. They within the first hour got into the Visual Studio Code and were writing code and making like real use cases for Misty when we could tear them away from Demolition Derby. They really wanted to smash the robots together. So I don't know. So we're getting out there. Usually it's not that young. It's usually high school and up. We're talking with schools. A lot of schools are interested in Misty because her price point, while high by some standards, when you're talking about education robots and robots in education, they're actually spending $8,000 a pop now on some of these robots, and so it's not. It is representing a shift downward in price. We're seeing a lot of colleges use them for research and curriculum, and libraries. Educating communities, libraries. I never kind of would have known. But they're really trying to democratize access to this kind of technology. So you can go to your local library and play with something that you might not be able to have at home. Any other ways you can think of?
I mean, not like tactically, but anecdotally, we look at Misty as a really good way to understand a variety of things, not only within computer science, but also physical computing. And like I was articulating before, like, very few people have a natural understanding of what a sensor is actually returning and how it functions and all these other things. So this is an area where I personally see the education component going down. Here's something that we can get started with that is based on potentially some standard computer science curriculum. JavaScript isn't generally a part of the computer science. Generally it's Python or other things, but the concepts that you're learning, and JavaScript isn't a difficult language to learn, that you can use a robot to reinforce architectural things that you're learning in class, down to the very pragmatic level with like how do these things actually work? How do I need to think about movement from an architecture perspective? So it's really interesting to see how many different use cases that we're encountering over time.
Yeah, cool. Does anyone have any follow-ups to any of that, and anything we talked to, or any last-minute questions that popped into their heads? You don't have to use the question thing if you don't want. You can just throw them in the chat. But no, this has been good. Thanks for walking us through a skill, a API skill that uses an external source. So yeah, I expect everyone to be able to create a mission and share it in the community now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll create a forum post kind of outlining the same things that we just went through. Yeah, so any questions I'm happy to answer on the skill, the upload process, Visual Studio Code extension, any sort of best practices on things that we make use of when we're building our own skills.
Mm-hmm.
It's all free game right now. So
any upcoming topics you want us to cover, I mean, definitely post those in the community forums or however you want to get that to us. If you want to hear from the person who, does the mapping work, or the person that's worked on the, the IMU tuning, we can get those people into here for some guest discussion.
Guest discussion. Yeah, we were originally supposed to have CP today, but we're doing a video shoot tomorrow. So there's a lot of prep work for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining, everyone, and we will see you in 2 weeks.